The first track that I ever released with a record label was a track called Lunar Drive. It's actually my most streamed track at just under 20 million streams on Spotify. And I released that with Chilled Cow, who are now obviously Lofi Girl. And it was on their first ever compilation EP, which was called 1am Study Sessions. I have the vinyl right here. So there is me right at the bottom over there. And this was my first ever experience releasing with a record label. And honestly, it was a major turning point in my life. It was sort of when my music started to take off. And since then, I've had a really great relationship releasing with Lofi Girl. So whenever they announce a new compilation, I always drop what I'm doing and try and write some music for it, because it's always such a great thing to be a part of. They're always printed on vinyl, and they've got some great artists working on there. And the Lofi Girl team in general always make it such a special occasion, so it's great to be part of. So that brings me on to today's video, where I'm going to be breaking down one of my new releases on the latest compilation, which is 12am Study Sessions. So the track I'll be breaking down is a track called Ceres Calls, and it was released in collaboration with another artist called No One's Perfect. So I'll be breaking down the full track as well as what went into the master. So yeah, I'll just hop right into it now and break down the Ableton project. So quickly before I start, if you've not heard the track yet, I'll play it in full at the end of the video to listen to, or you can listen to it in the description down below. Check it out on Spotify, or alternatively, you can just listen to the breakdown and then listen to the full track in that order. And before I delve into the project file, I'll just let you know what the guitar chords are and how I played them. These were sort of the basis for the whole track, and everything else just sort of laid into that. So it starts off as quite a simple chord progression, and this is played throughout the intro. And then when it gets into the main section of the track, we've then got like an arpeggiated version of that. So the chords are a B minor, a D major, and an E minor, back to D major. So the introduction, I'm just playing the chord and then letting it ring out with a bit of delay. And then when it goes to the main section, all I'm doing is playing it arpeggiated. So I'm playing the E string, A string, G string, and then just playing the A and the G. And that's sort of the core of the track, where everything else sort of builds upon. I'll later add in 7th and 9th notes to make it a little bit more interesting and arpeggiate it and texture it. But that's the root of the track. And now onto the project file. So just to start things off, as always with lo-fi, I've got a nice soft atmosphere. This is a market atmosphere like the one in my last sample pack. It's just a soft final crackle laid in with some sort of pitched down atmospheric market sounds. Nothing fancy there, just make sure to cut the low end and cut any harsh frequencies out, because you don't want that interfering with the mix. And then what I'll do is I'll start with the instrument bus. So starting off with the guitar. So these guitar 1, 2 and 3 are layers that I've recorded. They've been frozen just to eliminate some CPU usage. That just means that the amp simulation and some of the effects have just been embedded into the audio file. So when I press play, it's not trying to compute that all the time. So this guitar 1 is just the chord progression that I showed you in the intro. It's just my usual clean guitar rack with some delay, and then on top of that I've got a little auto filter sweep, so that's bringing in some of the high end as the introduction goes through, as well as the Compilation reverb on there. And I've used brush free to get rid of some of the amp noise that you can hear, which does cut away a little bit the high end, but not too much. So that's guitar 1, and that layers in with guitar 3, which is just sort of lead melody lines, most of which I got rid of because No One's Perfect provided me with some great guitar leads. So it's just this little bit at the end and this little bit at the beginning. So that's the first two. And then we've also got guitar 2, which is again the arpeggiated version that I talked about in the introduction bit. So that's just again the same chord progression, arpeggiated. And that is that for the 3 guitar lines that I recorded. And then we add in the No One's Perfect lines as well. So he has provided me with some really nice leads. So we've got this one, which plays throughout most of the track, just sort of like the main hook. And we've also got this sort of like end. Which is a little bit more heavily affected, got some delay and some more effects on there as well. So that is No One's Perfect's guitar lines. And then one more thing worth mentioning in the guitar rack is that I've taken out this little snippet and and I've sent that straight to the master. So rather than going to guitars and then to the instrument bus, like everything else, it's gone straight to the master, which means it's not affected by any of the effects on here or on here, which I'll talk about in a second. So all that means is as I build up to the drop, you get that really clear guitar lead that brings it into the track nicely. If I didn't have that, it would sort of get lost a bit. So I think that really helps to make it a little bit more impactful. So that's that, and then I'll just close the group. On the guitar bus, I've just got the J37 stereo, which is a sort of tape simulation plugin from Waves. Really loving the Waves stuff at the moment. I'll drop a link to Waves in the description down below if you want to check out any of their plugins. But yeah, this was, I think I got this really cheap, like $20, and it just adds a nice bit of saturation and warmth, as well as some real subtle tape characteristics, which is just great to have on guitars, pianos, and just general instrument bus. So that's all I've got on the general guitar bus. And then that goes into the instrument bus, which has got a few effects, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I'll just break down the pianos next. So the pianos, these layer in with the guitars. So if I play at the same time. So I'm effectively just playing the same as the guitar, arpeggiated. And this is the Maggiore piano with no effect on there. Sounds really nice. I would recommend checking it out. So we've got this little piano melody that layers in, and then we've got these sort of chords that layer in, just 2 notes, just emphasizing the low end of the chords. And then I've got this sort of subtle arpeggiated thing, which is from the Noir Felt. So we've got some auto cut on there, just getting rid of the real high end, as well as some convolution reverb. So that is the piano bus. And effect-wise on there, I've got a J37 stereo again, which is again adding some saturation and some tape artifacts. And then I've also got their GW piano centric stereo, which is just like a piano width enhancer, and it just sort of brightens it up. It's a real nice, simple plugin from Waves. So this is what it sounds like with. If I take it off, it's sort of a little bit more mono and not as sort of wide and bright. So that's a real nice one to have on there as well, like pianos. And then the only other thing I've got on the instrument bus is this Oliver Patrice vocal effect. So this, I think I've talked about in recent videos. The vocal trio swells, and it's just a really nice atmospheric vocal addition that adds some nice texture to a track. So this is what it sounds like isolated, and then it's part of the track. So they all make the bulk of the instrumentation, and then I've got a few effects going on the master bus for this as well. So most of this is just for transitions and mixing purposes. So starting off with an auto filter. So I've automated this so that the low end of the instruments fades in nicely as the introduction builds up to the main bulk of the track. So that's just a nice way of transitioning from like a soft high end, bringing all the low end in. And then as it gets towards the main drop, it cuts it out again, which makes it a little bit more impactful when it drops back in. As well as that, we've got this Portal granular synth, and this is actually just the default setting, and it's just adding a bit of sort of a choppy sound as it builds up to the drop. So again, automating that to the drop, and then that drops in. And then again, I use the opposite effect where I cut the highs as we transition into different sections of the track. So now we're cutting the high end, gives it a muffled sound, and that builds back up, bringing the highs back in. We've also got a soothe on there, which is getting rid of some of the resonance. There's a lot of guitar recordings in there, which means that there's often a lot of harsh low end. So this just easily mixes that out. And then finally, I've got a glue compressor, which is sidechained to the kick. So when the kick's punching away, it sort of makes a little bit of space for it, basically. So that is everything on the instrument bus. So now we've covered that and the atmosphere. So kick and bass, nothing crazy going on here. Just a nice sort of subby low end kick. And then a sort of, again, soft bass guitar. And the bass guitar's also got sidechain to the kick. so it ducks out of the way for the kick as well as the instrument group. So nothing crazy there. I've used a DI bass guitar into the archetype Cory Wong P bass preset, and then finally onto the drums. So it starts off with this faller sound, which I've automated so that the panning moves it from right to left as the sound progresses, giving it quite a nice sort of swoopy feel. And then we've got a few different textures. So I've started off with like a little brush loop, which again I've got brush free on to sort of clean it up a little bit. Without it, it's just a bit harsh. So that's nice. And then I've laid in a sort of clicky top sound that I recorded, as well as a snare, which is lots of different layers. This was pre-sample pack, so I've not used any of those sounds. This was all the stuff I had prior to that. All, again, wooden percussive Foley-like sounds. All I've got on there is a bit of reverb and a slight auto cut. And then I also layer it with this super ambient mids. I don't know what this is from. I think it might have been a splice sample. And that's got a little bit of a parallel aggressor on there, just to give it a little bit more punch. And that's pretty much it for the drums. It's quite a simple one. When you layer in different recordings, it gives it all a nice depth without having this sort of electronic feel. The only other thing I layer in is this sample, which I think was another splice one. And that's just a hi-hat loop with a little bit more groove. So in the context of everything, this is what the track sounds like. And then on top of this, I've added some master effects. So, first off, this little group here is what I just have on my master as default. So I've got a VU meter just so I know roughly where I am in terms of the gain staging of the full track. I've also got this Abbey Roads stereo plugin, which is a great tool for sort of referencing your track. There's that, and then a limiter on there as well. But I turn all that off for the master. So I start off with this EQ Ain't, which is just making the low end mono below this frequency here. And it's also cutting anything below this. So it's just getting rid of any of the real low subs that we just don't need in the mix. And then I've got a Soothe, which again is cutting out some of the muddiness here automatically as the track progresses. Great tool, really easy to use. Next up is Gulfos, which is a similar plugin, but this is more of an overall EQ effect. So I was making it a little bit duller by dropping the brightness down, a little bit of tame and a little bit of recover. So that's sort of the EQ profile of what it's doing, and it adjusts to the track in different sections. Next up is the Ozone Exciter, which adds some sort of harmonics to the top end. Then I've got a compressor, which is mostly affecting the kick, which is the loudest part. And that's got quite a fast attack, fast release. And then next up is a sort of slower attack, slower release compressor as well. I've then got a limiter, which shouldn't really be doing much if I've gain stage properly. Finally is the Ozone Maximizer, which is just a great way of targeting the -14 LUFS that you need for Spotify. You can push it higher if you want to, but I just always aim for around -14 LUFS. But yeah, that covers pretty much everything in here. I've rattled through it a little bit, so let me know in the comments if there's anything I missed or anything you want explaining more of. Happy to answer those questions. If you want to check out any of the plugins, I'll try and drop some links in the description down below. But yeah, here is the final track, and definitely go check out the full 12 AM studio sessions compilation. There's some really amazing songs on there. And a quick plug too, I've just released my new range of merch. This is one of the hoodies, got my new logo on there, so if you want to check that out, you can go to mondoloops.com as well. But here is the final mastered track.